The projector hummed in the silence of my sister's living room, and I watched my husband's face drain of color as our family Christmas party transformed into his public execution. Red and green lights from the tree cast shadows across the screen where evidence of his 18-month affair played like a horror movie trailer. His mistress smiled up at him in photograph after photograph, her hand on his chest outside the Palmer House Hotel, their champagne glasses clinking at Gibson's Steakhouse, their bodies intertwined on Navy Pier with the Ferris wheel glowing behind them. My mother-in-law gasped. His boss set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. And Tom, my husband of 22 years, finally stopped smirking. But let me take you back 3 months, to when I still believed in the illusion. September arrived in Chicago with that perfect autumn crispness that makes you forget the brutal summer heat. Our brownstone in Lincoln Park looked like something from a magazine spread, all exposed brick and restored hardwood floors. I'd spent the morning arranging chrysanthemums in the foyer, preparing for our annual neighborhood potluck. Tom worked late most nights at his advertising firm, climbing the corporate ladder with the same charm that had won me over in college. At 47, he still turned heads, still made me laugh, still kissed me goodbye every morning like we were newlyweds. I should have known better. I'm 45 years old. I've lived long enough to understand that perfect facades crack eventually. The text message arrived during our date night at Alinea, the Michelin-starred restaurant where Tom had proposed 2 decades earlier. We'd requested the same table, tucked in the corner where the soft amber lighting made everything feel intimate and sacred. I remember watching him across that pristine white tablecloth, the way candlelight caught the silver threading through his dark hair, thinking how lucky I was to still feel butterflies after all these years. The sommelier had just finished describing our wine pairing, a 2015 Burgundy that tasted like velvet and earth, when Tom's phone buzzed against the table. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed atmosphere, where even conversations were whispered. I saw his eyes flick to the screen, saw something shift in his expression just for a microsecond, before his hand shot out to grab the phone. But I'd already caught a glimpse of the preview notification. "Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Jay." My stomach twisted, a physical sensation like someone had reached inside and squeezed. The wine I'd just swallowed turned acidic in my throat. "Who's Jay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, casual, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Tom didn't miss a beat. He laughed, that easy, charming laugh that had always disarmed me, the one that said I was being silly, that everything was fine. "It's just Jen from the creative department. We wrapped a huge campaign yesterday. Team bonding stuff. You know how it is." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his thumb rubbing circles on my palm in that familiar, comforting way. "Come on, Lynn. Don't let your imagination run wild. You're too sensitive sometimes." Too sensitive. The phrase landed like a seed, small and seemingly insignificant, but it would grow roots in the coming weeks. I forced a smile, squeezed his hand back, and let him change the subject to the food arriving at our table. The Grant Achatz tasting menu, usually a religious experience of culinary artistry, tasted like ash in my mouth. But I played along, complimenting each course, laughing at Tom's jokes, performing the role of the content wife while something dark and uncertain coiled in my gut. We walked home along the lakefront afterward, his arm around my shoulders, September air crisp against our faces. The Chicago skyline glittered across the water, Navy Pier's Ferris wheel spinning in the distance, and Tom pulled me close, kissing my temple. "Love you, babe. Thanks for being patient with my crazy work schedule." His voice was warm, sincere. I wanted desperately to believe him, so I did, because the alternative, acknowledging that something was fundamentally wrong, was too terrifying to contemplate. That phrase would become his weapon. Too sensitive, too paranoid, too emotional. Every time I questioned the late nights, the mysterious charges on our credit card, the perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his collar, he'd smile that patient smile and tell me I was overreacting. He'd pull me close and whisper reassurances until I felt foolish for doubting him. The gaslighting was so subtle I didn't even recognize it as abuse. I just thought I was losing my mind. I know you're shaking your head right now, wondering why I didn't see it sooner. Believe me, I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times. But love isn't blind, it's paralyzed. It makes you doubt your own instincts because admitting the truth means watching your entire world collapse. The second crack appeared 2 weeks later. I was putting away Tom's dry cleaning when a receipt fluttered from his jacket pocket. Tiffany and Coberian, September 23rd, for a platinum necklace with sapphires, my birthstone. My heart leaped for a moment, thinking maybe he'd planned a surprise, but my birthday had been in June. I waited for him to present it, creating elaborate scenarios in my mind where he'd saved it for our anniversary or Christmas. Days passed, weeks, nothing. The receipt sat in my jewelry box, hidden beneath my grandmother's pearls, while I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation. But another part, the part that was already learning to doubt myself, whispered that there might be a perfectly reasonable explanation. Maybe it was for his sister, maybe for his mother, maybe for that company raffle he was always organizing. When I finally gathered the courage to mention it casually over breakfast, his face showed genuine surprise before smoothing into that practiced smile. We were sitting at our kitchen island, morning light streaming through the windows, NPR murmuring from the radio. The moment felt so ordinary, so domestic, which made what came next all the more disorienting. "Oh, that was for the raffle at the company gala. Didn't I tell you? We all chipped in for the grand prize." He buttered his toast with steady hands, not meeting my eyes, focused on the perfect distribution of butter across the bread. "Linda, honey, you really need to stop going through my things. It feels invasive." The word hit me like a slap. Invasive. I'd found something in his pocket while doing his dry cleaning, a chore I'd performed for 22 years, and somehow I was the one crossing boundaries. The logic twisted in on itself, making me dizzy. "I wasn't going through your things," I said quietly. "The receipt fell out when I was hanging up your jacket." "Still." He looked up then, his expression patient but firm, like he was explaining something to a child. "It makes me uncomfortable knowing you're checking my receipts, reading into every little thing. We need to have trust in this marriage, Lynn. Don't you think?" Just like that, he'd turned my discovery into my transgression. I apologized. Can you believe that? I apologized for finding evidence of his lies. I said I was sorry for making him feel uncomfortable, for being invasive, for not trusting him, and he accepted my apology graciously, kissing my forehead and telling me he knew I didn't mean anything by it, that he understood I was just stressed. October in Chicago means the trees along Lakeshore Drive explode into flames of orange and gold. I took long walks along the shore, trying to sort through the static in my head. The city I loved felt different now, like I was seeing it through a stranger's eyes. Navy Pier's Ferris wheel spun in the distance, couples pressed close in the enclosed gondolas, and I wondered if Tom had taken her there. Had they laughed at the same jokes we once shared? Did he buy her roasted almonds from the vendors like he used to buy for me? My best friend Sarah found me crying on a bench near Oak Street Beach. She'd known me since college, had been my maid of honor, had held my hand through 2 miscarriages and my father's death. She took one look at my face and said, "Whatever you're about to tell me, I already believe you." Those words broke something open inside me. I showed her the text message screenshot I'd secretly taken, the receipt I'd photographed before returning it to his pocket. Sarah didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't suggest marriage counseling or communication workshops. She pulled out her phone and called her brother-in-law, a private investigator who specialized in domestic cases. "You need proof," she said quietly, her hand warm on my shoulder as we sat there with the lake wind whipping around us. "Not for him, for you. Because right now he's making you doubt reality. And that's exactly how they maintain control." The word They hung in the air. Abusers. The word I hadn't been able to apply to Tom, my husband, my partner, the man who'd held me through my father's funeral and painted the nursery blue before our second miscarriage. But Sarah was right. What he was doing had a name: gaslighting, emotional abuse, and it was time to stop pretending otherwise. Before I met with the investigator, I did something I'd been avoiding. I followed Tom. I know how that sounds, trust me. The jealous wife playing detective. But I needed to see with my own eyes, to validate my instincts before spending money we didn't have on professional surveillance. It was a Thursday evening in mid-October. Tom had texted that he'd be working late, another campaign crisis. Don't wait up. I parked 2 blocks from his office building on Michigan Avenue, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago River in shades of copper and gold. Office workers streamed out of buildings, eager to start their weekends early. I felt ridiculous, sitting there in my Honda with a baseball cap pulled low, like I was in some bad crime drama. Tom emerged at 7:30, but he wasn't alone. She was brunette, petite, probably in her early 30s. She wore a burgundy dress that fit her like it had been tailored, and when she laughed at something Tom said, she touched his arm in a way that was far too familiar. They walked toward the parking garage together, his hand hovering at the small of her back, not quite touching, but close enough to suggest ownership. I followed them. I don't know what possessed me, what combination of rage and desperation drove me to start my car and pull into traffic behind Tom's BMW. They drove to Gibson's Steakhouse in the Gold Coast, valet parking, him opening her car door with a flourish that used to be reserved for me. I sat across the street, watching through the restaurant's windows as they were seated at a cozy booth, watching him order wine, watching the way she leaned forward, engaged, delighted by whatever charm he was pouring over her. I sat there for 2 hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached, watching my husband date another woman. When they finally left, he kissed her. Not a peck on the cheek, but a real kiss. His hand tangled in her hair, her body pressed against his on the sidewalk, while valets and pedestrians moved around them like they were a natural feature of the landscape. I drove home in a daze, my vision blurred by tears, and vomited in our bathroom for 20 minutes. When Tom came home at midnight, smelling like scotch and her perfume, I was in bed pretending to sleep. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Sorry I'm so late, babe. You know how it is." And I lay there in the dark, my eyes burning, wondering how many times he'd done this, how many lies I'd swallowed, how much of our marriage was real. The metallic taste of betrayal is something you can't describe until you've experienced it. It coats your tongue every morning when you wake up next to someone you no longer trust. It flavors every kiss, every conversation, every casual touch. I functioned on autopilot, playing the role of devoted wife while my mind spun with possibilities I didn't want to acknowledge. Tom seemed relaxed, confident, occasionally even extra affectionate. Looking back, I realized my submission to his gaslighting had emboldened him. He thought he'd successfully neutralized the threat. The investigator, Marcus, was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who'd seen every variation of human deception. He sat in Sarah's living room and explained the process with clinical efficiency. Phone records, credit card statements, GPS tracking, surveillance. "Most people think they're covering their tracks," he said, "but they get comfortable. They make mistakes. If he's doing what you suspect, we'll find evidence within 2 weeks." I signed the contract with shaking hands, authorizing charges that would deplete my secret savings account, money I'd been setting aside from my part-time bookkeeping work. Tom had always controlled our finances, insisted it was easier if he handled everything, that I didn't need to worry about bills and investments. Now that control felt like another form of imprisonment, another way he'd made me dependent. Marcus was methodical in his questions. Does he have any patterns? Regular nights out? Favorite restaurants? I listed everything I could remember. The Thursday late nights, the weekend golf outings, the business trips that seemed more frequent lately. Marcus took notes, nodded, and assured me he'd be discreet. "Mrs. Morrison," he said before I left, "I need you to understand something. If what you suspect is true, finding proof might be the easy part. Deciding what to do with that proof will be harder. I've seen marriages survive affairs, and I've seen them end in spectacular fashion. You need to think about what outcome you want, because the evidence I gather will give you options, but it won't tell you which option to choose." I thought about that on the drive home. What did I want? Did I want to save my marriage? Could I forgive 18 months of systematic deception? Or did I want something else? Something that felt dangerous and exhilarating in equal measure? I wanted the truth. I wanted vindication. I wanted everyone who thought Tom Morrison was such a great guy to know exactly who they were dealing with. The waiting was excruciating. I moved through our home like a ghost, dusting surfaces that didn't need dusting, reorganizing closets that were already organized. Our bedroom, with its view of the Chicago skyline, felt claustrophobic. The California king bed where we'd made love and made plans now felt like enemy territory. I started sleeping on the couch, claiming back pain, unable to bear the intimacy of shared space with someone I no longer knew. Tom noticed my distance, but attributed it to my mood swings. He suggested I see my doctor, maybe adjust my hormone therapy. "You've been really off lately, babe," he said with concern that almost seemed genuine. "Maybe you're depressing yourself spending so much time alone. Why don't you join that book club your sister keeps mentioning?" His ability to reframe my legitimate suspicions as symptoms of my own deficiency was masterful. Part of me even wondered if he was right, if I was manufacturing drama where none existed. That's the insidious thing about gaslighting. It makes you doubt even your most certain knowledge. I'd seen him kiss her, and yet he had me questioning whether what I'd witnessed was real. Then Marcus called. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to come to my office. There are things you need to see." The drive to his office in Bucktown took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. October rain pelted the windshield, Chicago's autumn weather turning cold and hostile. I parked in the lot behind his building and sat there for 5 minutes, trying to steady my breathing. Once I walked through that door, once I saw whatever evidence he'd gathered, there would be no going back to comfortable denial. Marcus's office was utilitarian. Gray walls, metal desk, filing cabinets that looked like they'd survived several decades. He gestured to a chair across from his desk and began laying out photographs like he was dealing cards. Each one landed with a soft thud that echoed in the quiet room. The photographs landed on his desk like grenades. Tom and a brunette woman entering the Peninsula Hotel. Tom and the same woman at a corner table in RPM Italian, his hand covering hers. Tom and her walking along the Riverwalk at sunset, his arm around her waist. The images blurred as tears filled my eyes, but Marcus kept laying them out, building his case with methodical precision. Her name is Jennifer Caldwell. She's 32, works in his firm's creative department. They've been involved for approximately 18 months based on credit card patterns and calendar analysis. 18 months. A year and a half of lies. A year and a half of him coming home to me after being with her. A year and a half of me questioning my sanity while he systematically dismantled my confidence. The grief hit first, that crushing weight that makes breathing difficult. But beneath it, something harder crystallized. Rage. Cold, clarifying rage that burned away the fog of confusion and self-doubt. "There's more," Marcus continued, sliding over bank statements. "He's been moving money, opening accounts you're not aware of, transferring funds from your joint savings into investments registered only in his name. Based on these patterns, I'd say he's preparing to file for divorce, but he wants to hide assets first." He looked at me with something like pity. "Mrs. Morrison, you need to talk to a lawyer immediately, like today." The hum of the fluorescent lights in Marcus's office became the soundtrack to my transformation. I wasn't the weeping, confused woman who'd walked in. I was someone harder, someone calculating. Can you get me everything? Every transaction, every photo, every piece of evidence? My voice sounded foreign, stripped of warmth. I want dates, times, locations. I want it documented like a legal brief. Marcus smiled grimly. I'll have a complete file ready by Friday. But Mrs. Morrison, what are you planning? Justice, I said. I'm planning justice. The lawyer, Patricia Chen, had a corner office in the Loop with windows overlooking the Chicago River. She reviewed Marcus's file with the expression of someone who'd seen this story play out 1,000 times. You have an excellent case for divorce based on adultery and financial deception. Illinois is a no-fault state, but this level of systematic asset concealment will work heavily in your favor for settlement. She looked up at me. The question is, do you want this handled quietly or publicly? I thought about all the times Tom had smiled at me while lying, all the times he'd made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts, all the times he'd dismissed my feelings as jokes or oversensitivity. I want him to feel exactly what I felt, I said quietly. I want him exposed. I want everyone to see who he really is. Patricia nodded slowly, and I could see her mind already working through strategies and implications. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob that suggested no-nonsense competence. Then we need to be strategic. We need to protect you financially first, then orchestrate the revelation in a way that maximizes impact while minimizing your legal exposure. Can you maintain the facade at home? Can you pretend everything's normal while we prepare? Could I? The thought of touching him, kissing him, pretending to be the oblivious wife made my skin crawl. But the alternative, tipping him off before securing my future, was worse. How long? I asked. 6 weeks, maybe 8. We need to secure injunctions against asset transfers, gather additional documentation, prepare for worst-case scenarios. Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. And Mrs. Morrison, once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over, publicly and permanently. Are you certain? I thought about the woman in those photographs, smiling up at my husband. I thought about the necklace I'd never received, probably hanging around her neck. I thought about 18 months of elaborate deception. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Patricia spent the next hour outlining the strategy. We'd file injunctions to freeze all accounts the morning of the confrontation, preventing Tom from moving any more money. She'd prepare a complete accounting of his asset concealment, documentation that would torpedo any claim he made to equitable distribution. We'd gather evidence of the affair, not for moral judgment. Illinois didn't care about that, but to establish a pattern of deception that extended to his financial conduct. The public exposure is trickier, Patricia said, drumming her fingers on her desk. You need to be careful not to defame him. Truth is an absolute defense, but we need to ensure everything you reveal can be documented and proven. If you're planning what I think you're planning, some kind of public confrontation, you need to stick to facts. Photos, receipts, statements. No editorializing, no emotional accusations that can't be backed up. She pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Walk me through your idea. What exactly are you envisioning? I told her about my sister's Christmas party, the annual gathering that Tom loved because it meant networking and showing off our picture-perfect marriage. I told her about the family slideshow tradition, how I'd volunteered to create it this year. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sat back with something like admiration in her eyes. That's bold. It's risky, but if executed correctly, it could be devastatingly effective. The key is making sure everything you show is verifiable. Can you do that? Marcus has photographs with timestamps. I have copies of all the bank statements. I can pull everything from Tom's cloud backup. He uses the same password for everything. The words came out calm, measured, nothing like the emotional wreck I'd been weeks ago. Rage had given me clarity. Purpose had given me strength. Good. We'll coordinate the timing. I'll file the injunctions at 9 a.m. on the day of the party. By the time he's served, it'll be too late for him to move anything, and when he leaves that party, when his world is burning down around him, he'll have nowhere to run and no resources to fight back with. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't kind. Mrs. Morrison, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen a lot of scorned spouses, but you're playing chess while everyone else plays checkers. Going home that night was surreal. Tom was in his study, reviewing campaign presentations for a pitch the next morning. He looked up when I entered, reading glasses perched on his nose, the picture of domestic normalcy. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" The casual affection in his voice, knowing what I now knew, was obscene. I wanted to scream, to throw his laptop across the room, to demand answers. Instead, I smiled. "Fine, quiet. I picked up that wine you like from Binny's." I kissed the top of his head, tasting bile in my throat. "You're the best," he murmured, already refocused on his screen. "I'll probably work late tonight. This pitch is killing me." Another lie, so smooth it could have been true. Was he actually working, or planning to see her? I didn't ask. I just retreated to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of the wine I'd bought, letting it burn down my throat while I calculated my next moves. The following weeks required an acting performance worthy of an Oscar. I laughed at Tom's jokes. I initiated sex, detaching mentally while my body went through familiar motions. I attended his company events, shaking hands with colleagues who probably knew about Jennifer, smiling until my face ached. The private investigator continued surveillance, documenting every encounter. The lawyer filed preliminary paperwork, securing injunctions that would freeze our accounts the moment I gave the word. Sarah checked on me daily, worried I was fragmenting under the pressure. "You don't have to do this," she said over coffee at our usual spot in Wicker Park. The cafe was warm and fragrant, a refuge from November's bitter cold. Students hunched over laptops, couples shared pastries, and everything felt absurdly normal while my life was anything but. You could just file quietly, take the settlement, start over. No one would judge you for that. But I would judge myself. I would spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to fight back. "He made me doubt my sanity," I said quietly, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug for warmth. He looked me in the eyes and lied so convincingly that I questioned reality. "That's not just infidelity, Sarah. That's abuse. And I'm not letting him get away with it." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then I'm with you. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I've got your back." The close call came in late November. I was in the study, uploading Marcus's latest surveillance photos to an encrypted cloud drive when I heard Tom's car in the driveway. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours. Panic flooded my system as I frantically closed windows and cleared browser history. He walked in just as I minimized the final tab, finding me apparently reading a recipe blog. "What are you doing in here?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the desk. "You never use my computer." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. "Mine's updating," I lied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I was looking up that pot roast recipe your mother makes. Thought I'd try it for Thanksgiving." The mention of his mother softened him immediately. He kissed my forehead. "You're sweet to think of that. She'll love it." Crisis averted, but my hands shook for an hour afterward, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Thanksgiving passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Tom carved the turkey while regaling my family with stories from work, charming and witty as always. His parents praised me for the pot roast, unaware that their son was systematically destroying me. I caught my sister's eye across the table, saw the concern there. She knew something was wrong but respected my silence, trusting I'd come to her when ready. After everyone left, Tom pulled me close on the couch, tipsy from wine, and whispered, "I'm grateful for you, Lynn. You're my rock." The hypocrisy was staggering. I murmured something appropriate and counted the days until Christmas, until the moment I'd been planning. Patricia called in early December with news that made my blood sing. "We have everything we need. The injunctions are ready to file. Your settlement package is ironclad. Now we just need your signal." She paused. "I have to ask one more time. Public exposure carries risks. He could retaliate. His family could turn on you. Are you prepared for the fallout?" I thought about my sister's annual Christmas party. The one Tom loved because it meant schmoozing with influential neighbors and showcasing our perfect marriage. I thought about his boss who'd be there, his colleagues, his parents. I thought about the family slideshow my sister always projected, the one I'd volunteered to create this year. "I'm ready," I said. "File everything the morning of December 23rd. I'll handle the rest." The party preparations consumed the next 2 weeks. My sister Karen was thrilled I'd taken over the slideshow, not knowing I was weaponizing her hospitality. I spent hours curating images, a decade of family photos that would establish the narrative of our perfect life before the devastating reveal. Tom noticed my dedication to the project and praised my effort, oblivious to the trap being set. "You're making Karen's night special," he said. "She's lucky to have you." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Jennifer Caldwell's Instagram provided the final pieces. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. A photo of her hand wearing a sapphire necklace, tagged at the Art Institute. Tom's jacket, visible in the background of a coffee date with a friend. Check-ins at restaurants I recognized from Marcus's reports. I downloaded everything, backed it up multiple times, and created a presentation that would leave no room for doubt or deflection. The technical work of creating the slideshow became meditative. I'd sit in our study late at night while Tom slept, arranging images with careful precision. Each photograph told part of the story. Our wedding day, young and full of hope. Vacations where we smiled at the camera. Holiday gatherings where we looked like the perfect couple. Then the shift, the receipts, the text messages, the surveillance photos that Marcus had captured with such damning clarity. I practiced the timing, making sure each image would land with maximum impact. Too fast, and people would miss the significance. Too slow, and Tom might have time to interrupt, to craft an explanation, to regain control of the narrative. I needed the evidence to unfold like a prosecutor's closing argument, each piece building on the last until the verdict was inescapable. December 23rd arrived cold and clear, the kind of Chicago winter day where the air hurts your face. Patricia filed the injunctions at 9 a.m., freezing our accounts and formally initiating divorce proceedings. Tom would be served papers the next day, but tonight, at the party, he'd learn the truth in the most public way possible. I dressed carefully in a red dress Tom had always loved, armor for the battle ahead. The silk felt cool against my skin, and I paired it with the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 10th anniversary. I wanted to look beautiful. I wanted him to see what he was losing, to understand the magnitude of his mistake. When I emerged from the bedroom, Tom looked up from his phone and smiled. "Wow, you look incredible." He crossed the room and kissed me, and I let him, knowing it would be the last time. He complimented me as we left, holding my hand in the car, still playing the devoted husband. I wondered if he felt anything genuine, or if it was all performance by now. Did he love her? Did he love me? Or were we both just props in whatever narrative he'd constructed to justify his choices? Karen's brownstone in Roscoe Village was already packed when we arrived. Neighbors mingled with family, Christmas music played softly, and the smell of mulled wine filled the air. Tom immediately gravitated toward his boss, Mark Richardson, launching into conversation about Q1 projections. I caught Sarah's eye across the room. She nodded once, confirming she'd positioned people strategically. Everyone who mattered was here. Everyone who needed to witness this was present. I moved through the party in a strange state of hyper-awareness. Every conversation felt significant. Tom's colleague from work, praising his recent campaign. Karen's neighbor, asking about our holiday plans. Tom's mother, thanking me for being such a wonderful daughter-in-law. Each interaction felt like the last normal moment before a bomb detonated. Patricia had stationed herself near the door, officially just another guest, but I knew she was there to ensure everything went according to plan. Marcus had emailed me that morning, confirming all documentation was backed up in multiple locations. Sarah stayed close, my anchor in the chaos that was about to unfold. The slideshow was scheduled for 8 p.m., after dinner, but before dessert, when attention was focused, but alcohol had loosened inhibitions. Karen tapped her glass, calling everyone to the living room. Linda put together something special for us tonight, a look back at our family's year. She dimmed the lights, and the projector hummed to life. Tom stood beside me, his arm around my waist, confidently expecting heartwarming nostalgia. The first images were exactly that. Our trip to Galena in spring, Karen's birthday dinner, family barbecues and beach days. Tom relaxed, probably already mentally composing the humble thanks he'd give for being included. I felt his body soften against mine, his guard completely down. He had no idea what was coming. Then the timeline shifted. September. That first text message filled the screen, blown up to high resolution. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Jay. Tom's arm tensed around me. Confused murmurs rippled through the room. The next slide showed the Tiffany receipt. Then the photos. Tom and Jennifer at the Peninsula. Tom and Jennifer at Gibson's. Tom and Jennifer on Navy Pier. His hand tangled in her hair as they kissed against the backdrop of the Chicago skyline we'd admired together 1,000 times. The room fell silent, except for the projector's mechanical click as images advanced. Hotel keycard receipts, bank statements showing transferred funds, calendar entries that contradicted every business trip he'd claimed, text messages Marcus had retrieved from Tom's cloud backup, intimate exchanges that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. I felt Tom try to pull away, but I held his arm firmly, my fingers digging into his sleeve. His face had gone from confident to confused to horrified in the span of 30 seconds. His mother made a strangled sound. Mark Richardson's expression hardened from shock into something like disgust. Jennifer appeared in photo after photo, younger and smiling, wearing the necklace that should have been mine, living a version of my life in stolen moments. The final slide was the bank statement showing 18 months of systematic asset transfer. $500,000 moved from our joint accounts into investments only Tom could access. Proof of premeditated financial abandonment to go with the emotional devastation. The screen went dark, the lights came up, and the room exploded into chaos. Tom started stammering, "This isn't, I can explain, this is taken out of context." But his voice was drowned out by angry questions. His father demanded to know what the hell he'd been thinking. Karen was crying. Mark Richardson was already on his phone, presumably with HR. And I stood there, calm in the eye of the storm I'd created, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Tom turned to me, his face a mask of panic and rage. "How could you do this? Here? In front of everyone? These are private matters, Linda." The audacity of his indignation was almost impressive. I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 22 years, and saw a stranger. Worse, I saw a coward who'd only operated in shadows and was now exposed to light. "They're just the truth, Tom," I said quietly, echoing the phrase he'd used so many times to dismiss my concerns. "Try not to ruin the evening." The room fell silent as my words landed. Sarah started to laugh, a sharp bark of vindication. Others joined in, not from humor, but from the sheer audacity of using his own weapon against him. Tom's smirk, the one I'd endured through months of gaslighting, crumbled into something ugly. "You vindictive bitch," he hissed, low enough that only I could hear. But Sarah heard. She stepped forward, positioning herself between us. "I'd be very careful about your next words, Tom. You're already facing adultery and fraud charges. Threatening her in front of witnesses would just be stupid." She pulled out her phone. And yes, I'm recording. Mark Richardson approached, his voice tight with controlled anger. Tom, I think you should leave. We'll be discussing this situation on Monday. But for now, you're not welcome here. Tom looked around wildly, seeking support, finding only disgust and disappointment. Even his parents wouldn't meet his eyes. His mother was sobbing into her hands, while his father stood rigid, jaw clenched. Tom made one last attempt at manipulation, turning to me with pleading eyes. Lynn, please, can we talk about this privately? Just the two of us. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. 22 years, babe. That has to mean something. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married, the one who'd promised forever on a beach in Michigan, who'd held my hand through my father's funeral, who'd painted the nursery blue before the second miscarriage. But I also saw the man who'd looked me in the eyes and lied for 18 months. The man who'd gaslit me into questioning my sanity. The man who'd stolen from our future to fund his affair. The man who'd called my pain sensitivity and my questions invasive. You're right, I said softly. 22 years should mean something. That's why this hurts so much. That's why the betrayal cuts so deep. You didn't just cheat, Tom. You made me doubt reality itself. That's not a mistake. That's abuse. His face hardened. The mask finally dropped completely, and I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. You'll regret this, he said. You think you're so smart, but you'll end up with nothing. I have the best lawyers money can buy. I'll bury you in legal fees until you're begging to settle. Patricia stepped forward from where she'd been observing near the door. Mr. Morrison, I'm Patricia Chen, your wife's attorney. You were served injunction papers this morning at 9 a.m. Your accounts are frozen, your assets are under court protection, and your attempt to hide marital funds has been documented and reported. Those lawyers you mentioned. You'll have to pay them from personal funds you no longer have access to. I'd suggest you leave before your situation gets worse. The color drained from Tom's face as the reality of his position crystallized. He'd been outmaneuvered, outplanned, and outplayed. The man who'd controlled every aspect of our marriage through manipulation was now powerless. He looked at me one final time, and whatever he saw in my expression made him flinch. You've changed, he said, like it was an accusation. No, I replied. I finally stopped changing to accommodate your lies. He left without another word, pushing through the crowd that parted for him like he was contaminated. The door slammed behind him with a finality that echoed through the suddenly silent room. Karen rushed to me, pulling me into a fierce hug. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. None of us did. Others crowded around, offering support, asking what they could do, condemning Tom's actions. But I felt oddly detached, like I was watching the scene from above. Sarah ushered me to the kitchen, away from the chaos. How are you really? She asked, searching my face. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady despite the adrenaline crash beginning to hit. I'm free, I said simply. For the first time in 18 months, I'm free. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to doubt myself anymore. I know the truth, and now everyone else does too. The party didn't recover, understandably. People left in clusters, offering hugs and promises to check in. Mark Richardson pulled me aside before departing. I want you to know that Tom's position at the firm is being reviewed. We have a zero-tolerance policy for behavior that reflects poorly on our company values. What he did to you is unconscionable. He handed me his card. If you need a reference or a job opportunity, please call me. You've shown remarkable strength tonight. Tom's parents lingered after most guests had gone. His mother approached me with red, swollen eyes. Linda, I don't know what to say. I thought I raised him better than this. I'm so sorry for what he put you through. His father just shook his head, shame and anger warring in his expression. You deserved better. You always deserved better." They left looking older than when they'd arrived, their son's actions aging them in the span of a few hours. By midnight, only Sarah, Karen, and Patricia remained. We sat in Karen's kitchen, exhausted but wired, processing the evening's events. "What happens now?" Karen asked, refilling wine glasses. Patricia pulled out her tablet, reviewing documents with practiced efficiency. "Now we move forward with the divorce. Tom will likely try to contest the asset division, but we have documented proof of his fraudulent transfers. Illinois law is clear on this. He'll end up with far less than he would have gotten in a standard 50-50 split. The adultery doesn't legally matter, but the financial deception does." She looked at me seriously. "He'll probably try to make this difficult. Men like Tom don't handle public humiliation well. You need to be prepared for him to lash out, to spread lies, to turn mutual friends against you. But you have the truth on your side, and more importantly, you have documentation. Every time he claims you're vindictive or unstable, we show the evidence of his systematic deception. Every time he plays victim, we show the bank records." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this. Whatever he throws at you, we'll handle it together." I looked at these women who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life and felt overwhelming gratitude. Tom had isolated me gradually, making me dependent on him for validation and truth. Reclaiming my autonomy meant rebuilding connections he'd eroded, but I was ready for that work. I was ready for all of it. That night, I stayed at Karen's house. I couldn't face going home, walking into the space Tom and I had shared, sleeping in a bed that still smelled like his cologne. Karen made up the guest room, and I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, processing what I'd done. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a strange emptiness. I'd spent weeks planning this moment, and now that it had arrived, I didn't know what to feel. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed me tonight. I know I made mistakes, but what you did was cruel. We could have handled this like adults." The audacity made me laugh, a sharp, bitter sound in the quiet room. I blocked his number and finally fell asleep. The next few weeks were brutal. Tom hired an aggressive attorney who immediately went on the attack, filing motions claiming I'd orchestrated a public humiliation campaign to destroy his career and reputation. He painted himself as the victim of a vindictive wife who'd violated his privacy. His lawyer demanded the court consider my emotionally abusive behavior in settlement discussions. Patricia crushed every argument with documented evidence of Tom's systematic fraud and deception. He tried reaching out through mutual friends, spreading his version of events. Some people believed him, or wanted to, because it was easier than confronting uncomfortable truths about someone they thought they knew. But most saw through the manipulation. His reputation in our social circle was destroyed. Mark Richardson did follow through, and Tom was quietly asked to resign from his position. His company didn't want the scandal or liability of keeping him on staff. Jennifer Caldwell also faced consequences. Her own boyfriend, whom she'd been with while seeing Tom, found out about the affair through the social media fallout. She was demoted at work and eventually transferred to their Milwaukee office. I felt no sympathy. She'd known Tom was married. She'd worn my jewelry. She'd participated in my erasure. The legal proceedings dragged through winter. Tom contested everything, trying to delay the inevitable. But Patricia was relentless. By March, we had a settlement that gave me the house, 60% of our liquid assets to compensate for his hidden transfers, and a clean break. Tom signed the papers in his lawyer's office. We didn't see each other. Patricia handled everything, sparing me from having to look at him again. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood in our house, now solely mine, and felt the weight of 22 years lift from my shoulders. Everything in these rooms held memories, both beautiful and painful. The couch where we'd watched countless movies, the kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday dinners, The bedroom where we'd made love and made plans. Each space whispered with ghosts of who we'd been. I decided to sell it, to start fresh somewhere without ghosts. Sarah helped me pack, boxing up a life I was leaving behind. We laughed and cried, sometimes simultaneously, processing the magnitude of transformation. I donated most of the furniture, kept only what truly mattered. The coffee table we'd refinished together went to Goodwill. The bed went to a consignment shop. The wedding china, gifts from relatives who'd celebrated our union, I left in boxes by the curb. I bought a small condo in Andersonville, a neighborhood I'd always loved, but Tom had dismissed as too eclectic. The place had exposed brick and big windows overlooking a quiet street lined with trees. It was mine alone, no shared history, no painful associations. I painted the walls colors I loved, hung art I chose, created space that reflected who I was becoming, rather than who I'd been. The first night in my new place, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The silence wasn't oppressive or lonely. It was clean. There was no one to lie to me, no one to make me doubt myself, no one to minimize my reality. Just me, rebuilding from the foundation up. The divorce settlement gave me financial security, but more importantly, it gave me time to figure out my next chapter. I enrolled in classes at Northwestern, finally pursuing the degree in psychology I'd abandoned when Tom and I got married. Understanding the mechanics of manipulation and gaslighting from an academic perspective helped me process my experience. I started volunteering at a domestic abuse hotline, using my story to help others recognize the signs of emotional abuse. The training for the hotline was intensive. We learned about the cycle of abuse, the tactics abusers use to maintain control, the psychological impact on victims. Sitting in those sessions, I kept recognizing patterns from my own marriage. The love bombing in the beginning, the gradual isolation, the erosion of my confidence, the way Tom had made me dependent on him for validation. It all had names. It all followed predictable patterns. I hadn't been weak or stupid. I'd been targeted by someone skilled in manipulation. The training instructor, Dr. Rebecca Hart, was a clinical psychologist who'd worked with abuse victims for 30 years. She had this way of explaining manipulation tactics that made everything click into place. Gaslighters don't start with big lies, she explained during one session. They start small. They question minor details. Are you sure that's what I said? I think you're misremembering. They plant seeds of doubt that grow over months and years. I sat there taking notes furiously, recognizing every tactic she described. Tom questioning my memory of conversations. Tom suggesting I was being too sensitive. Tom reframing my legitimate concerns as symptoms of my own emotional instability. It was all textbook manipulation, and I'd fallen for it because I'd loved him, because I'd trusted him, because the alternative, accepting that the person I'd built my life with was systematically undermining my grip on reality, was too painful to contemplate. The most dangerous thing about emotional abuse, Dr. Hart continued, is that it's invisible. There are no bruises, no broken bones, just a slow erosion of the victim's sense of self, their confidence, their trust in their own perceptions. And because it's invisible, victims often don't recognize it as abuse until significant damage has been done. During a break, I approached her. How do you help people rebuild after that kind of damage? I asked, after their reality has been distorted for so long? Dr. Hart looked at me with understanding eyes. You validate their experiences. You help them trust their instincts again. You show them the patterns so they can recognize them in the future. But mostly, you listen. You believe them when others haven't. That validation is often the first step toward healing. Her words stayed with me when I took my first call on the hotline. The woman on the other end, her name was Rachel, told me her husband said she was crazy for thinking he was cheating, even though she'd found hotel receipts. Her voice shook as she described how he'd convinced her she was having memory problems, that she was imagining things. I heard my own story in her words, and I knew exactly what to say. You're not crazy. Your instincts are telling you the truth. And I know this because I've been exactly where you are. Really? Her voice broke. Because sometimes I think maybe he's right. Maybe I am paranoid. Maybe I am making something out of nothing. That's what he wants you to think, I said gently. That doubt you're feeling? That's not natural. That's manufactured. When someone repeatedly tells you that your perceptions are wrong, that your feelings are invalid, that your concerns are symptoms of your own deficiency, they're gaslighting you, and it's abuse. We talked for an hour. I shared parts of my story, told her about the text message, the receipt, following Tom, hiring Marcus. I explained how I doubted myself even after seeing him kiss Jennifer because he'd been so effective at making me question reality. By the end of the call, Rachel was crying, but it was different than the desperate. Confused tears at the beginning. These were tears of recognition, of validation, of relief at finally having someone believe her. What should I do? She asked. I don't have anywhere to go. We have kids. I don't have my own money. I gave her resources, shelters, legal aid organizations, Patricia's name, Marcus's contact information. But I also gave her something more important. Permission to trust herself. Permission to take time to plan. Permission to prioritize her own well-being and safety. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, processing. This was my purpose now. Not just surviving my own ordeal, but using that experience to help others navigate theirs. Tom had tried to destroy me, to make me doubt my own mind. Instead, he'd created someone stronger, someone who could recognize abuse in all its forms, someone who could guide others toward their own reckonings. Tom's life, from what I heard through the social grapevine, spiraled downward. He bounced between jobs, his reputation preceding him. Jennifer had cut contact after realizing he'd lied to her too, painting me as an enemy rather than a victim. He dated sporadically, but nothing stuck. His parents maintained minimal contact, disappointed and hurt by his choices. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but I felt no pity either. He'd created his circumstances through his own actions. Sarah suggested I write about my experience. Not for publication necessarily, she clarified, but processing it on paper might help. And who knows, maybe it could help others recognize the warning signs in their own relationships. I started writing in coffee shops, documenting not just what happened, but how it felt, the slow erosion of self-trust, the gradual normalization of unacceptable behavior. The words poured out of me. Mornings before class, I'd sit in the corner cafe on Clark Street with my laptop and write. I wrote about the first text message, the Tiffany receipt, the night I followed Tom and saw him kiss her. I wrote about Marcus's office and Patricia's strategy sessions. I wrote about the Christmas party and the aftermath. But mostly I wrote about the gaslighting, the insidious way Tom had made me doubt my own reality. My story attracted attention from a support group for women recovering from emotional abuse. They asked me to speak at their monthly meeting. Standing in front of 30 women, seeing my pain reflected in their eyes, I understood the true purpose of my ordeal. Not revenge, though that had felt satisfying in the moment, but bearing witness, validating their experiences. Showing them that reclaiming your reality from someone who tried to rewrite it was possible. I shared the specific tactics Tom had used, the dismissiveness disguised as humor, the way he'd reframe my concerns as my problems, the isolation masked as preference, the financial control positioned as protection. Women nodded, some crying, recognizing their own stories in mine. One woman approached me afterward, her voice shaking. I thought I was going crazy. He tells me I'm too sensitive, that I misremember things, that I'm paranoid. But you just described my life. How do I get out? I gave her Patricia's number. I told her about Marcus. I explained the importance of documentation and strategic planning. But mostly, I told her she wasn't crazy. Her instincts were valid. Her pain was real. Sometimes that validation is the first step toward freedom. the speaking engagements multiplied. Domestic violence organizations, women's shelters, college psychology classes studying emotional abuse. Each time I told my story, I refined it, focusing on the elements that would help others recognize the patterns in their own lives. And each time, women approached me afterward with similar stories, variations on the same theme of manipulation and control. The first time I spoke at a large conference, I was terrified. It was a regional domestic violence prevention summit in Milwaukee. 300 people in the audience, mostly professionals, social workers, counselors, law enforcement. I stood backstage, my hands shaking, wondering what I was doing. Sarah had come with me for moral support, and she squeezed my hand before I walked out. "You're not just telling your story," she whispered. "You're giving voice to everyone who couldn't speak up. You're making the invisible visible." I walked onto that stage and looked out at the sea of faces, and something shifted. These weren't strangers judging me. These were allies, people who dedicated their lives to helping abuse victims, people who understood the dynamics I'd lived through. I took a breath and started talking. I didn't just tell the Christmas party story, I went deeper. I talked about the gradual nature of gaslighting, how it doesn't announce itself as abuse. I shared the specific phrases Tom had used, the patterns of behavior that normalized my doubt. I explained how financial control had been weaponized, how isolation had been disguised as preference, how my concerns had been systematically reframed as my deficiencies. The most insidious part, I said, was that I thought I was the problem. I thought if I could just be less sensitive, less paranoid, less emotional, then everything would be fine. I didn't realize that too sensitive was code for stop noticing what I'm doing. I didn't understand that too paranoid meant stop trusting your accurate instincts. I didn't recognize that too emotional was shorthand for your feelings are inconvenient to my lies. The room was silent. I could see people nodding, taking notes, some with tears in their eyes. When I finished, the applause was thunderous, but more importantly, the line of people waiting to talk to me afterward stretched across the entire conference hall. One woman told me her husband moved their savings without telling her. Another described how her partner convinced her that her friends didn't really care about her. A third shared how her boyfriend made her feel guilty for wanting to spend time with her family. Different details, same fundamental dynamic, someone systematically dismantling their partner's autonomy and self-trust. But there were also professionals who wanted resources, who asked for permission to share my contact information with clients, who thanked me for articulating dynamics they'd struggled to explain. A police officer told me he'd responded to countless domestic calls where there was no physical violence, just a woman insisting something was wrong while her partner seemed reasonable and concerned. "I didn't always understand what I was seeing," he admitted, "but now I do. Now I know what questions to ask." A therapist approached me with tears streaming down her face. "I just realized I've been gaslighting my own clients," she said. "When they come in saying their partner is making them feel crazy, I've been suggesting they examine their own behavior, consider their role in the dynamic. I've been inadvertently supporting the abuser's narrative. You've changed how I'll practice going forward." These conversations were why I kept speaking. Every engagement, every story shared, every professional whose perspective shifted, it all rippled outward. I wasn't just processing my own trauma. I was contributing to a broader understanding of emotional abuse, helping to create a culture where this behavior was recognized and named. I started a blog, sharing my experiences and hosting a community for survivors. The comments section became a space for women to share their stories, to support each other, to break the isolation that abuse thrives on. We created a resource library with information on recognizing abuse, documenting evidence, finding legal help, creating safety plans. What had started as my personal catharsis became a movement. Now, almost a year after that Christmas party, I look back on the experience with hard-won wisdom. Betrayal of this magnitude doesn't heal, it scars over. Some days I still feel the ghost pain of that violation, the residual trauma of 18 months of systematic deception. But I also feel stronger. I trust my instincts now. I've rebuilt my sense of reality on bedrock rather than sand. If you're listening to this and recognizing patterns in your own relationship, pay attention. Gaslighting is insidious because it's gradual. No one wakes up one day and suddenly doubts their sanity. It's 1,000 small moments where your reality is questioned, your feelings are minimized, your concerns are reframed as your problems. It's being told you're too sensitive, too paranoid, too emotional, too much. It's having your discoveries turned into your transgressions. It's loving someone who makes you feel crazy for trusting yourself. The signs are there if you know what to look for. Does your partner dismiss your feelings as overreactions? Do they tell you you're remembering things wrong when you confront them with inconsistencies? Do they isolate you from friends who might validate your concerns? Do they control finances in ways that make you dependent? Do they present as charming to others while diminishing you in private? Do you find yourself constantly apologizing for things that aren't your fault? Do you doubt your own memory and perception? These aren't signs of a relationship needing better communication. These are signs of emotional abuse. And here's the critical thing: it doesn't get better. Abusers don't wake up one day and stop manipulating. They escalate, confident in the control they've established. The only way out is through, and through requires planning, support, and courage. Document everything. Screenshots of texts, photos of receipts, recordings if your state allows single-party consent. Build your case like you're preparing for trial because you might be. Consult a lawyer before confronting your partner. Secure your finances. Tell trusted friends what's happening. Create a safety network and trust yourself. Your instincts are trying to protect you. Listen to them. I'm not going to pretend my public exposure method is right for everyone. It worked for me because I needed Tom to face consequences, needed witnesses to prevent him from rewriting history. But quiet departures are just as valid. What matters is reclaiming your truth and your autonomy, however you choose to do it. My life now bears little resemblance to the one I had 2 years ago. I'm finishing my degree. I'm volunteering work I find meaningful. I'm dating again, cautiously, with better boundaries and clearer standards. I'm rebuilding friendships Tom had slowly eroded. I'm learning who I am outside of a relationship that defined me for over 2 decades. It's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Dating after Tom has been a lesson in trusting myself. The first man I went out with seemed perfect, charming, attentive, interested in my story. His name was Michael, a financial consultant I met at a coffee shop. He had that same easy confidence Tom had displayed, that ability to command a room's attention. Our first date was at a trendy restaurant in the West Loop, and he ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. "Trust me," he said with a smile. "I know the menu here. You'll love what I've chosen." The old me might have found that gesture romantic, protective even. The new me felt my stomach tighten with recognition. After dinner, when I suggested we split the check, he laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. I've got this. What kind of man lets his date pay?" That night, I lay in bed analyzing the interaction. Was I being too sensitive? Was I seeing patterns where none existed? Then I remembered Dr. Hart's words. Trust your instincts. They're trying to protect you. The issue wasn't that he'd paid for dinner. It was that he'd made decisions without consulting me, had dismissed my preferences, had framed his controlling behavior as chivalry. Different packaging, same dynamic. I ended it after the second date, when he showed up at my condo unannounced with flowers. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, "though my neighborhood was nowhere near his office or apartment. Thought I'd surprise you." The presumption of access to my space, my time, my life, without invitation or permission, that was the final red flag. When I explained I didn't think we were compatible, he got angry. "You're damaged goods anyway," he said. "No wonder your husband cheated. You're paranoid and cold." The words stung, designed to hit where I was most vulnerable. But instead of internalizing them, instead of wondering if he was right, I recognized them for what they were. An attempt to punish me for setting boundaries, to make me doubt the instincts that had accurately identified his controlling behavior. I closed the door in his face and felt nothing but relief. The old me would have ignored those instincts, afraid of being too picky, too damaged, too paranoid. The new me knows that my comfort matters more than politeness. And more importantly, I know the difference between healthy caution and trauma-induced paranoia. My radar wasn't malfunctioning. It was working exactly as designed. The second man I dated was different. David, a high school history teacher I met in my abnormal psychology class. He was quiet, thoughtful, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested a life well lived. We'd been assigned as partners for a group project on attachment theory, and I noticed immediately how he interacted. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He acknowledged when he didn't know something. He accepted feedback without defensiveness. Our first date was his suggestion, but he asked where I'd feel comfortable meeting. "I want you to feel safe," he said simply. "Pick the place, pick the time. I'll be there." We met at a bookstore cafe in Andersonville, public and casual, and talked for 3 hours about everything except my past. He didn't pry, he didn't push. He let me offer information at my own pace. When I finally told him about Tom, about the affair and the gaslighting and the Christmas party confrontation, he listened without interrupting. His face showed genuine emotion, empathy without pity, anger at what I'd endured without making it about his own feelings. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said when I finished. "I can't imagine how hard that was to live through, but I'm glad you got out. I'm glad you're here." David respected my boundaries in ways I didn't know were possible. When I said I needed to take things slow, he didn't push or pout or make me feel guilty. He didn't try to convince me that his feelings should override my comfort. He just accepted my pace and matched it. We've been seeing each other for 3 months now, and it feels healthy in ways I didn't know relationships could feel. There's no doubt, no second guessing, no wondering if I'm imagining red flags. When he says he's working late, I believe him because he's never given me reason not to. When he tells me I'm important to him, I trust it because his actions align with his words. When I express a concern, he addresses it instead of dismissing it. This is what partnership looks like without manipulation. This is what respect feels like without strings attached. "You're different than other women I've dated," David said one evening as we walked along the lake. Spring had finally arrived, the water reflecting sunset colors, the city coming alive after winter's hibernation. "How so?" I asked, curious but wary. Tom had also told me I was different, had used that perceived uniqueness to isolate me from others. "You know yourself," David said. "You know what you need, and you're not afraid to ask for it. You have boundaries, and you maintain them. You don't play games or expect me to read your mind. It's refreshing. It's real." He squeezed my hand. "I know you've been hurt. I know trust doesn't come easy for you now, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm willing to earn that trust, however long it takes." And he has been patient, consistent, honest. Everything Tom wasn't. I'm not ready to say I love him yet. The word feels too big, too weighted with history. But I'm ready to say I'm open to the possibility. I'm ready to believe that not all men are manipulators, that healthy love exists, that I deserve partnership that enhances rather than diminishes me. Some nights I still wake up angry about the time I lost to Tom's lies. 18 months I spent doubting myself when I should have been planning my escape. But I try to reframe that regret into gratitude for the clarity I eventually found. Not everyone gets that. Some people spend entire lifetimes in relationships where their reality is constantly questioned, never finding the proof or courage to break free. The question I get asked most often is whether I regret the public exposure. Did I go too far? Was the humiliation necessary? And my answer is always the same. Tom spent 18 months humiliating me privately, making me question my sanity, stealing from our future, all while performing the role of devoted husband publicly. All I did was correct the public record to match the private truth. If that caused him embarrassment, perhaps he should have considered that before spending a year and a half betraying every vow he'd made. I think about that moment at the Christmas party a lot. The hum of the projector, the shocked silence, Tom's face draining of color as his carefully constructed facade crumbled. And I remember thinking, this is what truth feels like. Not gentle or kind or considerate, just necessary. Like lancing an infected wound, painful but ultimately healing. Someone once told me that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I hated Tom for a while after everything came out. Hated him for the lies, the theft, the gaslighting, the casual cruelty disguised as jokes. The hatred was consuming, kept me up at night. Colored every interaction with the world. I'd see couples holding hands and wonder if they were hiding the same rot beneath the surface. I'd hear someone laugh and wonder if it was at someone else's expense. The trauma had rewired my perception, made me see threats everywhere. But healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated and full of setbacks. There were days I'd feel strong, confident, rebuilt from the ground up. Then something would trigger a memory, a scent of Tom's cologne on a stranger, a phrase that echoed his dismissiveness, and I'd spiral back into that place of doubt and fear. Those moments were getting fewer and farther between, but they still happened. Dr. Hart taught me to be compassionate with myself during those moments. Trauma lives in your body, she explained. Your nervous system learned to be hypervigilant because it had to be. Unlearning that takes time. Give yourself grace for the hard days. Now, almost 2 years out, I feel mostly indifferent toward Tom. He's a chapter in my story, not the whole book. He tried to make himself the author of my reality, but I've taken back the pen. I don't wish him ill, but I don't wish him well either. He's simply irrelevant to my life now, and that indifference feels like the ultimate victory. Recently, I ran into him at a coffee shop in the Loop. I was meeting David for lunch, and Tom was there with someone I didn't recognize. Another woman, younger, eager, hanging on his every word. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw recognition, then something like shame, then that familiar attempt at a charming smile. I simply nodded once and turned away. No anger, no hurt, just acknowledgement of a person I used to know who no longer has power over me. Later, David asked if I was okay. That was him, wasn't it? Your ex-husband. He'd seen the interaction, caught the tension. Yeah, I said. That was Tom. Do you want to talk about it? I thought about it. Did I? Did seeing him stir up old feelings, old wounds? I checked in with myself, that practice of internal honesty I'd learned through therapy. No, I realized. I'm okay. He's just a person I used to be married to. He doesn't define me anymore. David squeezed my hand. Good. Because the woman you are now is pretty incredible. And I'm starting to believe that. Not because someone else told me, though it helps to hear, but because I can see the evidence in my own life, the degree I'm earning, the work I'm doing to help others, the boundaries I maintain, the instincts I trust, the peace I've built in my small Andersonville condo, the life that's fully mine, untainted by someone else's lies. So I want to ask you, wherever you're listening from, whatever time zone you're in, what would you do? If you discovered your perfect life was an elaborate fiction, would you have the courage to blow it up? Would you fight for the truth, even if it meant destroying the comfortable lie? Or would you take the quiet route, the settlement, and the silence? There's no wrong answer. We all have to navigate our own paths through betrayal and reconstruction. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar, or know someone who has, leave a comment. Tell me your city, your time zone. What part of this story hit you hardest? If you've been through gaslighting, share one thing you wish you'd known earlier. If you're supporting someone through this, tell us what you're learning. This community is how we break the isolation that emotional abuse thrives on. And if you're currently in a situation where your reality is being questioned, where you're being told you're too sensitive or too paranoid, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not crazy. Your instincts are valid. Your feelings are real. The confusion you feel is a symptom of manipulation, not a character flaw. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Consult professionals. And most importantly, trust yourself. For everyone else who made it through this story with me, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone, that others have walked this path and survived, that the other side of betrayal can lead to something stronger and truer than what we lost. If you found value in this story, hit the like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming, rebuilding, and reclaiming truth in the face of deception. Check out the videos on screen for similar narratives of resilience and transformation. And remember, your story matters too. Whether you're ready to tell it publicly or just beginning to acknowledge it privately, it's valid and it's yours. Until the next story, take care of your heart, trust your instincts, and remember that the truth may hurt, but lies hurt worse. From my corner of Chicago, where winter is finally giving way to spring and new beginnings are blooming everywhere, this is Linda, signing off. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's living well, and I'm learning to do exactly that.